All right. Everyone should be joining. Welcome, everyone. We'll give it a few more minutes for folks to come in. Carlos, happy to have you here. Thanks for chatting. Folks, as you join, if you want to drop in the chat where you're joining from, that would give us a good sense of who's joining us from the audience and from where. We're going to give it a few minutes as people come in for them to get on in before we get into things. Ohio, great. Angela, thank you. Nathan, Sarah, Aaron, wow, okay. Someone from New York, California, coast to coast. UNT, right there outside of Dallas. Long Beach, nice. Great. Thank you all for that. We're a few minutes past, so I'm going to go ahead and kick us off. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I am Josh Laborde, and I have the honor of being your host this afternoon. Real quick, as we go, please drop any questions into the Q&A, and we'll certainly be sure at the end to have some time to go through those. For those of you who don't know me, I'm currently an Associate Vice President at BWF in our Systems and Operations practice. If you're not familiar with BWF, we are a comprehensive fundraising consulting firm. We provide counsel and services for all aspects of fundraising, development, and advancement programs. We've been doing so for 40 years, celebrating our 40th anniversary. Here you can see in my background there. Personally, I haven't been at it for 40 years, but I do have almost 25 years of experience in information technology and operations. I've spent the last couple years here at BWF. Immediately before joining the firm, I was the Director of Philanthropy Operations at a 24-hospital health system. Prior to that, I spent a short time in the development office of the Art Institute in Chicago. And prior to that, I was in advancement services at Illinois Tech. I won't bore you with what I refer to as my prior careers, but I did spend time in technology startups and in telecommunications. I will share with you that I have a bachelor's degree in computer engineering from Louisiana State University, go Tigers. Also an MBA from the University of Texas in Dallas, not El Paso. I also have a few postgraduate certificates from other universities, including Rice and Illinois Tech. And I am joined today by Chelsea Lamego, who is the co-founder and CEO of FundMiner. For those of you not familiar with FundMiner, it simplifies fund management and automates gift administration for fundraising organizations. Chelsea was previously the Assistant Vice President for Advancement Operations at the University of Texas, El Paso, not Dallas, aka UTEP, where she oversaw several operations units within the Institutional Advancement Division. While there, he pioneered the creation of a gift and endowment management system, which won a Case Grand Gold Award in 2020, and later became the basis for FundMiner. Prior to joining UTEP, Chelsea was the executive director of the El Paso Opera, where she now serves as president of the board of trustees. Chelsea is also an alumna of UTEP, where she received both a bachelor's and master's degree in business administration. Welcome, Chelsea.
Thanks for the introduction, Josh. Excited for our conversation today.
I am excited as well. And then also joining us is Jake Logan. Jake currently serves as the Vice President for Institutional Advancement at UTEP, where he leads dedicated teams in the areas of development, advancement services, and alumni engagement. He has more than 20 years of experience in nonprofit fundraising, with more than 15 of those in higher education. Most recently, he served as the president of the Ball State University Foundation and vice president for university advancement, where he provided strategy and guidance for development, advancement services, alumni engagement, and the BSU Foundation, including managing the institution's endowment. Jake has also served as assistant vice chancellor for university programs at the University of Missouri, executive director of development at the University of Oregon School of Law, and as a development officer for his alma mater, the University of Florida. He actually began his career in philanthropy with the American Heart Association, where he earned national recognition for his pioneering work in online fundraising strategy. Jake holds a Bachelor of Science in Public Relations from the University of Florida and a Master's of Nonprofit Management from the University of Oregon. Welcome, Jake.
Thanks, Josh. Eager to chat.
Great. Now that we've done introductions, let us just start off, and I'm going to go ahead and take down this slide so people can kind of see us a little bit better. But let's just start off with, you kind of telling us about yourselves. So, Chelsea, why don't you kick us off and get us going with, a little bit more about you and how you ended up in your current role.
Sure. Thanks, Josh. So as Josh mentioned previously, I'm the co-founder and CEO of FundMiner. And FundMiner is really I like to call it the intersection of my path so far and my passion. My passion being entrepreneurship, building things, and problem solving. It was something I cared deeply about since a very young age. And I'll spare you guys the stories of slinging popcorn to the neighbors and setting people up with babysitters and pet sitters and house sitters for some time. But my path really ended up being the nonprofit and advancement world. And like a lot of advancement professionals, and probably most everybody on the call today, I didn't plan to work in the advancement field. I sort of just fell into it. And this actually happened while I was studying at UTEP. So I'm a two-time UTEP alumni. I studied my undergraduate there in business and then went to grad school again to get my MBA. And during grad school, I found myself working as executive director of the El Paso Opera. And it was when I was leaving that job that I ended up transitioning over to UTEP in the advancement office, which was a larger advancement office. I got to have more responsibility, learn new things, and really see what a larger scale advancement shop was like. And of course, that's how I know Jake as well. He was my former boss there as the VP. That's also where I first engaged with BWF. We got to work on a lot of different data analytics and database cleanup projects while I was there. We're going to talk a lot about the different cleanup projects that we worked on over my 5 years working at UTEP. But really fortunate to have met both BWF and Jake there. And now, just a couple of years later, BWF is a partner of FundMiners, and we're also really fortunate to have the strong support of UTEP as well. Jake and Dr. Wilson over at UTEP were really wonderful when we were getting FundMiner off the ground, and we are just so fortunate to have tested out our product in real life with them when we first got going.
Great, thank you, Chelsea. Jake, tell us more about you and how you ended up at UTEP.
Good Lord, I'm not sure there's much to share that's super interesting. I started out my career after college in sales and was only in sales for 2 years. I was about to change careers because the places where I worked, they kept changing my commission structure whenever I would sell a big account. So I thought I was going to change careers. And then my brother's girlfriend at the time persuaded me to talk to her boss with the American Heart Association. She said that fundraising had all of the things that I liked about sales and none of the things that I hated. And turns out she was right. I feel fortunate that I very quickly found what I imagined to be my calling, kind of my purpose in fundraising for these causes that are meaningful. And so I took over the office at the Daytona Beach office of the American Heart Association, and fast forward 20 plus years later, I'm sitting here at UTEP, and thrilled to be here.
Great. Thank you for sharing. Jake, I'm going to stick with you. So as a VP overseeing a fundraising organization, tell us a little bit about how you define success, and also how do you look to your operations folks and your operations team to support your goals?
Yeah, I mean, the most conspicuous, the most obvious indicator of success is whether or not you're raising money, right? And I think we're fortunate that thus far we have been raising a lot more money here, and so that's obviously a positive thing. But I think what that allows us to do are those other things that I imagine to be indicators of success. One of the things that's critically important to me is a positive organizational culture. Spend a lot of time and energy, lot of time and energy on, trying to make sure that this is the best workplace it possibly can be. I believe that's the way that we want to build things the right way for the long term. And I think a critical building block of all of that is organizational culture. It has also allowed us to kind of adopt this, I guess I'd call it pursuit of excellence mindset, which, we've got a lot of people here who feel really good about their colleagues, really feel safe in their role. And I think it allows them to feel comfortable enough to start pushing the boundaries. We've got some incredibly talented people here who are trying new and interesting things. And so this kind of pursuit of excellence culture, where every time we do something well, we're so excited to do it even better the next time around. And that's one of those less obvious indicators of success. The positive organizational culture is huge. And again, hard to measure, but we do. The pursuit of excellence mindset, I think that's critically important. We're just trying to get better at everything that we do every day. And I believe that if you're doing all those things right, the money will come. And like I said, so far it has.
That's great. Kelsey, so when you were at UTEP, what were some of the things that you did to help support those efforts that Jake just mentioned?
So one of my favorite sayings of Jake's is that advancement is this three-legged stool. And so I really wanted to make sure that our leg of operations was really holding up our end of the deal and providing the right support to the fundraising and engagement teams for them to go and do the great work that they were doing. And I mean, how can we support them? Of course, having well-run and efficient operations, but what does that actually or practically mean? And so I always like to really start with the baseline and understanding the landscape. And so reviewing processes and making sure that those are documented was step one. Our advancement office had gone through a lot of significant change over a lot of years. And so there wasn't really a lot of consistency. There were hardly any processes documented. So that was sort of a starting place for us. We actually went through every unit within our advancement office, talked to the unit head, and had them list out the different procedures they were going to start drafting. And of course, it took time, and we got to each of the procedures over time slowly, but we quickly started to identify gaps and inefficiencies within our processes. We were interviewing folks who were involved and listening to their challenges and pain points. From there, we really started to adjust those processes to align them with best practices. And I realized at that point, in a lot of ways, we had to completely go back to the basics and to basic things, right? Like, what is a gift and what's a non-gift? And so the casebook, that good old blue casebook, the global reporting standards or whatever they're called these days, was sort of my best friend. And, I had a ton of highlighting in there and was always making photocopies out of there. Thank God they have a digital version now. But really going back to definitions of even what are alumni and what's not alumni was something we talked in depth about, and actually a project that BWF helped us with. So I went back through all of the different processes, all the different definitions to make sure we were aligned with best practices, and slowly started to chip away at those. The gift agreement routing and approval process was another one we looked at, and we ended up centralizing that to sort of have some oversight over what we were promising to donors to make sure that we could carry through and deliver on those promises. Then we also started to actually measure fund utilization and compliance. This is something we were looking at for years before, it wasn't a brand new concept when I came on board, but what we started to do differently was looking at it proactively versus reactively. So initially we would pull a compliance report and look at our funds 3 months after the fiscal year ended. Well, of course, it's really hard to make any change if you're only looking at the situation months after it's happened. So we made an immediate shift to, at the time, starting to look at this data on a monthly basis. And that's when we really started to see real change. Was we were proactively looking at, are we using our funds? Are we using them in the best way? Are we honoring donor intent? Are we using the right amounts of our funds? And more importantly, do we have the data and information that we need to be able to report back and share to donors and share the impact that these gifts are actually having with their donors? And perhaps one of the biggest items that we did to really revamp the operations landscape at UTEP was reviewing our data and reporting processes. And one thing we really struggled with was sharing information. Our information, like most organizations, was stored in multiple siloed systems. We had our CRM system, our accounting system. We had gift agreements in a couple of different places, including hard copies. We had a separate endowment investment management company that was sending us CSV files. And I was gonna say there's a fifth system in there, it's our student award system. And so I realized that apart from me, I sort of seemed to be the bridge manually as a human who was combining data from those systems and sharing that information with our hundreds of fund managers across campus who actually needed this information to spend the money. And us in advancement needed them to spend the money so that we could share the impact back with donors and cultivate donor relationships. So that was a big focus area of mine, was initially early on making sure that we leveraged technology to get that information aggregated from those systems and in the hand of the fund managers. So really empowering the people who spend and use the money with the information they needed to be effective at it. And then us in advancement could leverage that information to take the information back to donors and help the fundraising team raise more money.
So I'll chime in a little bit here. So what Chelsea described is, basic best practices of exactly what you should be doing in those kinds of things. What she did not share was the absolute mess that she inherited, because for many of you who are in places that have your systems and processes in place, you're like, yeah, of course, that makes sense. We didn't have that. We did not have the fund managers had no idea what was in the account, and in some cases had no idea what they were supposed to be spending it on. We had what could be considered the wrong fund managers for different things. And what Chelsea came in and did is this: she stripped everything down and did this analysis of every piece of everything, including all of our policies and procedures. But what she ended up doing, and I want to say, like, she started doing this before I got here. This has nothing to do with me. She did this on her own. She started to understand, there were these pockets of money simply not being spent, right? And so she goes to our campus partners and basically was like, hey, want some free money? Here's money for you. And Chelsea became the single most popular person on campus because she uncovered, I'm not kidding, millions of dollars that could be spent differently, spent better. And I don't know, I wouldn't say that advancement had the best reputation on campus. And that was something that I was really charged with fixing. Chelsea really helped set us up for success, because when you bring money to people, they get pretty excited about it. And that really set the tone for one of our stated goals, was to be outstanding partners for our leaders on campus and everybody else. And she kind of made it so that we had a good reputation walking into it, and it was nothing short of remarkable. And what she came up with, completely unprompted, this gift and endowment management system is like nothing I have ever seen. I mean, I've been to some big places that were doing $1 billion+ campaigns. They don't have anything like this. And so she just kind of did it on her own without direction. And I don't think she had a clue what she built and what it meant in this industry. A funny story about her winning grand gold Chelsea knows the story. But when the UT system chancellor called and said, or vice chancellor called and said, hey, wow, this is huge. You guys won this international grand gold. And I said, wow, that's great. And so I called Chelsea and I said, listen, there was some wind up, and I told her, and Chelsea says, oh yeah, I figured. And I said, that's uncharacteristic of Chelsea. I said, tell me more. She's like, well, I saw the other ones and they were good, but I just think that this is probably more effective, more useful. And then I said, I don't think you have any clue what this is, right? The impact of, and I explained it to her like, if you've seen the Oscars, how you win an Oscar for things, you just won the Oscar for advancement services. and so I think that framing helped her understand just how truly special this thing that she built was and what it meant for our university. And I think now what it's going to mean to a lot of other institutions.
So I do want to talk more about the impact and kind of what these type of systems and organization around operations means. But I want to go back to something you kind of said a little while ago, Chelsea, which was basics and definitions, right? So recently, I actually participated in a workshop with BWF and IBM. We partnered with IBM in leveraging their Watson AI platform. IBM brought a diverse engineering team. It was a fairly large team, very smart people, but they had little to no knowledge of fundraising operations. So I actually got to develop and deliver a fundraising 101 or fundraising primer session. A large part of that time was spent defining those terms and those basics of fundraising operations, some of the ones that you've already mentioned. When I did your intro, I specifically mentioned that FundMiner automates gift administration. What I'd like you to do for us is tell us in your words, what is gift administration? What does that actually refer
to? Love to answer this question, Josh. Thank you. And before I directly answer your question, I kind of want to back up to a concept that Jake and I used to talk about all the time while I worked at UTEP that we really wanted to instill with our team, and that was radical ownership. And we were constantly trying to tell the team that we wanted them to radically own their roles. And I think when I think about my role at UTEP overseeing operations, I felt this radical ownership over the entire fundraising process. I mean, because in my world, operations really touches on everything, and I wanted everyone's experience to be really good. And I wanted to provide all those support and systems to help the entire fundraising cycle work better. And so gift administration, I think a lot of that is having this sort of from start to end ownership over the process and cycle. And gift administration is really all of the processes that happen before and after you receive the actual gift. So, and it's different from gift processing in the sense that traditional gift processing is really a receiving, recording, data entry function. Of course, for my gift processors out there, I know and understand it's so much more than that. So please don't hear me to be saying it's just a data entry position. But as far as the whole sort of gift administration cycle and process goes, it's really just one component of it. Before you actually receive the gift, one, as I mentioned, and I'll mention time and time again, you have to have all of the procedures in place, because for your donors and team and your institutional partners and stakeholders across campus, consistency is going to be key, and you have to deliver, and they're going to expect the consistency. And so it really starts with having that baseline of consistent processes in place that you can then iterate and improve on. Two, before you receive the gift, there is the gift agreement review and routing process. Or do you even need a gift agreement? I mean, of course, if it's going into an unrestricted fund, or if it's a certain annual fund, maybe you don't need one. But what differentiates between needing a new agreement and not? And that goes back to process. So then, of course, you are actually receiving and recording the gifts. From there, it's data availability, reporting, and analytics. So do the right people have the information they need related to those gifts that you're bringing in? And so then I go to your fund managers. So if you're a higher education institution, this is going to be all of your deans, your department chairs, your program directors. Do they know about the funds they're overseeing? Do they know that gift came in? Do they know what they can spend their money on? are you sharing that information with the right people at the right time? Then, are you using your funds and complying with those donor agreements? So making sure that you're monitoring fund utilization and compliance with donor agreements and other rules and regulations. Then there's a donor experience component to this. So recognition and impact reporting. And impact reporting is huge. If you can make sure a donor sees and feels the impact that they're gift making, you're really setting up the fundraising and frontline team for success. And then lastly, there's a data hygiene and controls and training component to this too. So how do you keep up with this over time and scale your operation? And how do you sunset funds? And when do you close them? And what are the different controls you have in place to make sure that information and sharing and reporting process we talked about earlier is actually happening and happening on the right time, and that the people who are supposed to be doing things know that they're supposed to be doing them, and what controls in place to make sure those people are doing those things. And lastly too, just the training of it, making sure that everyone around campus knows, or around your organization or across your organization knows what they're supposed to be doing, and when. So I really think gift administration specifically touches on almost, all of those aspects of an advancement operation.
Perfect. And thank you for that. So Jake, obviously Chelsea just described a lot, right?
Yeah.
And she talked about, sharing impact with donors and setting the frontline fundraisers up for success. But does all that really matter, or why does all that really matter? And who are the stakeholders who really care about everything she's describing?
Yeah, so I really mean it when I say that I see advancement as a three-legged stool. We just had a set of candidates in essentially interviewing for Chelsea's old position, AVP for Advancement Services, and I said that consistently throughout the conversations, and I was surprised that they were surprised that we saw that as an equal part. I really do see it as three equal parts. Obviously you can't have any of the rest if you don't have fundraising success, but I believe fully that you can't have sustained fundraising success unless your advancement services operation has their stuff together, right? I think that if you're not spending the money the way the donor intends, that's a problem, right? If you're not sharing with your campus partners how the money is to be spent, or you have it going to the wrong places, that's a huge problem from a credibility standpoint. I think that there's a lot of scrutiny on advancement offices. And so whenever anybody asks about numbers or any of the systems or processes from our side of the fence, we really better know the answer to that question, because from a credibility standpoint, again, I don't think we can do a fraction of the work nearly as well as we'd like to do it if we don't have that credibility. And as I mentioned before, Chelsea started really building this case for support, and or really started building this reputation. We tried to build on that. And again, we're really trying hard to be outstanding. We understand ourselves as a service unit to the university. We are trying really hard to understand the meaningful and important goals to some of my other cabinet colleagues, right? We have to understand how we use our alumni network and the rest of our team for the university to achieve its goals. And I think when people on campus see that authenticity, that desire to help them be successful, that we know our place as a service unit, that we have accurate information consistently, from a credibility standpoint, when you're in an area of, everybody's has competing resources, or we're all competing for the same scarce resources, for them to invest in the advancement operation, we have to have all of those pieces in place for us to be deserving of that investment. And I think that you can raise big dollars for a couple of years in a row, and I think people can be impressed by that. But if there's not substance behind it, if there's not consistency, if there's not a strong reputation, and you're not working hard to be a really good partner, then it doesn't matter how much money you raise. I don't think that you're going to be seen as a credible partner. And I think that's going to be problematic. I've seen it be problematic for places down the road.
Thank you. And I want to take this chance to remind our attendees, Any questions at all, please drop them in the Q&A. We definitely want to have quite a bit of time to answer any questions there. I know this is a chat with Chelsea and Jake, but we certainly want your participation as well. So Chelsea, I'm going to come back to you. Tell us about how what you did at UTEP led you to create FundMiner.
So, you know, we talked a lot about gift administration and what that means and what sort of has to happen as part of the different gift administration processes. And my work at UTEP that led me to create FundMiner really has to do with delivering on those different processes. So, you know, at first it was outlining the process, knowing what we have to do, starting to improve on those. But then it's like, okay, well, how do we keep up with this over time and at scale? It's one thing for me to produce a one-time report for all of the deans. You know, that's eight to 10 reports, if you, depending on who you count in there, but 8 to 10 reports maybe one time. If you start to include your department chairs, you know, that's going to turn into 150 reports. And so it's one thing to prepare those once, but how do you do that over and over? And even sending that information out monthly is challenging to do at that type of scale, if you can get to it monthly. So I was faced with this problem at UTEP of like, okay, I figured out kind of what we need to be doing, but then it was, how the heck do we do this? And over, and with so many people involved. And so that's when I really knew that leveraging technology would be the only way to operationalize the processes that I realized we needed to put in place. And so I, at the time, worked with a small team on campus to develop the first version of our platform. And we started to put the information from advancement in the hands of the people who were actually spending money across campus. And Jake talked a little bit about campus partners and really becoming a credible campus partner. And when I thought about customer service, I knew that our donors were our customers. And as an operations person, our advancement team also felt like one of our customers in the operations and advancement services office, because we were often providing information to our development team and our fundraisers and our engagement team, who were taking that information out and doing good work with it. And so I constantly was really focused on providing that customer experience and delivering on customer experience with our campus partners. And so I also knew that if I could get our fund utilization operating more efficiently, that would really become supportive to the frontline fundraisers, because there just got to a point where I said, like, I am not going to tell another development officer who's going to meet with a donor that we did not spend their scholarship money, and that no, I do not have a reason for why. I didn't want to keep delivering that message. And so I really set out to solve for the actual root problem. And going back to what I mentioned previously about radical ownership, you know, sometimes I'll talk to advancement folks who are like, you know, I just raised the money, like that's it. But if you really take ownership over your role and are contributing to your organization's real mission, it's not just about just raising the money. It's not about just entering it. It's really about caring about the entire cycle and making sure that that money you raise is then used on the right thing, and that you're sharing that impact back with the donors to contribute to the overall fundraising cycle and the future of your organization. So my work at UTEP really led me to developing this technology that helped us on campus. FundMiner is a bridge inside and outside of advancement of information on funds, and we specifically help with gift administration and fund utilization. And so what that meant for UTEP was we started to use a significant more amount of our funds. And so we were able to share that impact back with donors. And over those years, we started raising more money and we had better donor experiences. And so we started to really see that flywheel or that positive cycle take off and work. And then going back to the campus partners, I mean, you could just feel and see that we started to become a trusted and respected partner on campus, because we were listening to their goals and delivering and we were consistent. And so they knew that they could count on us, and they started to help us with our goals just as much as we were helping them meet their goals.
That's great. That's such a wonderful example of the support and the success that can be achieved there. Jake, kind of a last question before we start getting to the audience questions, but kind of what is the best advice you can give, or maybe the top 3 pieces that you would share with your advancement colleagues who are maybe struggling to have a well-run advancement operations shop? I mean, not all of them can win Case Gold, awards, but at least they can maybe improve them. What would you share with them?
So in part of this answer, I'll kind of go back to your initial question of how to end up at UTEP. One is something I'm not sure you can necessarily do anything about unless you make the choice to find this for yourself. But I ended up at UTEP because I was looking to have that partner in a president, somebody who was committed to building things the right way for the long term, somebody who was also committed to the pursuit of excellence grounded in integrity. And so my answer to your question here is I would not work for a president who did not have those things if you can help it. And so, I mean, she has just been such a wonderful breath of fresh air for some of the things that I've experienced in academia and higher ed. She is so supportive. She understands how important the advancement function can be, and she does not want to sacrifice short-term gains, or I'm sorry, long-term gains for short-term successes. So her message to me from the very beginning has been build it the right way for the long term. And so we're really trying hard to make sure that we can do that in every step of the way. It's that guiding force, right? We don't have to make compromises in how we kind of position ourselves. So I think you've got to choose to work for somebody who is supportive of doing things the right way if you can. Not sure how helpful that specific piece of the answer is, so I'll give you 2 other pieces. I think it's really transformed how people here at UTEP see advancement, that we understand our role as a service unit, that we care very deeply to try to understand the goals of the university and support them as best we can. I think that helps people understand that we are team players, that we're all in. I think too, you've got to justify your existence. You really do. And so when you're coming to a budget meeting, or your boss is coming to a budget meeting, one of the things that really transformed the investment the university was willing to make in us is we were really smart about how we characterized what this return on investment would mean. We use numbers and findings from the Educational Advisory Board, EAB, to build out our budget presentation and say, look, we need to right size our organization. We are significantly out of whack with what best practices percentage in headcount should look like. We were way high in the alumni engagement side, and we only had 2 full-time mid-ticket fundraisers when I got here. So that had to change, right? We said, we are going to right size things, and we need you to invest. There's a number that comes from EAB that every new FTE, development or not, should account for an increase of about $725,000 in marginal fundraising revenue. And we showed them, look, if we want to get to this number, we've got to add these number of people. And now it just so happened that we ended up being right. The next year we got to go and say, see, we told you. And that doesn't usually happen, because usually there's a little bit of a gap in time. You got to get your fundraisers up and running. You got to get your new hire up and running. But that number is actually held true all 3 years I've been here. Actually, we're over that number now from return on investment. So approaching it and saying kind of a data informed approach and saying, look, we intend to right size this organization based on industry-wide best practices. We're asking you to invest in us because your investment will mean this return. And then going back and showing them. So it's essentially my second point there would be have the receipts. And then the third piece, and you heard me say this before, invest in your people. we don't have a product. Advancement doesn't have a product. The only thing that we have is our people. And I've been in some places where it was not a positive organizational culture. And the reason why I wanted to become a vice president is because that was the single most important thing to me. And so the very first position that I hired was a senior director of talent management and team culture. And it sent the message I very much intended for it to send, not just to the people on the team, but also partners across campus, that we were going to build it the right way for the long term, including supporting and developing people. We've had to let go some people who were really, really talented, but weren't going to be committed to lifting everybody else up around them. And we've been consistent in that time and time again. And so I say, stick to your guns, do right by the people around you. No exceptions whatsoever. Invest in them, send them to conferences, provide them the tools that they need to do the job and do it well, whether it's consultants or, investing in FundMiner or different kinds of things. But invest in your people. And that's what I would say, I think.
And so, something I would add to what Jake brought up, but specifically about budget requests and getting that support for the resources you need to scale your advancement office, is we were able to use, fundraising numbers and the benchmarking data that he mentioned to justify some of these new hires, particularly, of course, in the frontline area. But as soon as we started to show some fundraising traction, the budget team or budget committee certainly understood also that we would need some support tools and resources to support that growth. And so those conversations suddenly also became easier. It was, as Jake mentioned, it was really helpful for us to really start having the data to show our success year after year and show them why we were asking for what we were asking for and exactly how it was going to be used. And a lot of being able to have that data goes back to, sorry, Josh, but not to harp on procedures too much, but having that data, like a lot of our ability to even show that data went back to tracking the information in the first place.
Yeah, those are all really good points. We're getting a lot of good feedback from the audience that they're excellent points, that it's a great conversation. I think we're ready now to move to questions. You both ready for that?
Yeah.
So we had one come in, Jake. I see that you took a stab at giving some information on it, but Erin has asked how much of the process redesign and stakeholder engagement that you've described was tied to any sort of digital transformation or implementation of more sophisticated technology tools like a new CRM. Kelsey, if I understand what you've described correctly, is the tools basically grew out of what you were trying to accomplish from a process standpoint. But maybe you can elaborate more on that.
Yeah, I would say we didn't end up switching our CRM. That wasn't something we sort of even were interested in, whether that was the right call or not. But we were sticking with our CRM. Our scholarship office was going to stick with their system. We were sticking with our same document archival system. The university accounting system was definitely not going to change, or not for a second time. I think it had changed a couple decades before and it was a disaster. So it was sort of actually like, how do we optimize the systems we do have and how do we get better at processes? The biggest digital transformation of sorts was when we implemented the gift and endowment management system, which is now FundMiner. So there was some digital transformation from that perspective, but that tool is specifically something that sits on top of these existing tools. So it's really an additional resource that really facilitates the processes and sharing of information inside and outside of the advancement office to the folks across the organization who are involved and need information. But a lot of it was also just going back to processes and having conversations with stakeholders. And I did a lot of charting and mapping and a lot of versions of each of those charts and maps.
Okay, great. Any other questions from the audience? You want to drop them in the Q&A? We have a few more minutes. We can certainly speak to them. Okay, here's another question that came through on the chat. Have your teams included AI in any of the processes yet? And is that something that if you haven't, you are looking to? Jake, have you implemented any AI at UTEP?
So I'm glad that you asked. Actually, this is going to be a surprise to everybody, but Chelsea's actually a robot. That's what I tell her. Yeah, look, the AI conversation is coming. As a matter of fact, that photo that Chelsea showed me was AI because I don't take good photos. It's coming. And I think we all have to come to terms with it and embrace it. We have used it for job descriptions, for event agendas and itineraries. We have used it for writing some of the light copy. We are starting to use it pretty significantly. And I hosted a conversation at a conference not too long ago. It was kind of a heated topic. I think AI is coming, right? And there are people, I think it will change hiring. Yes. I don't think we need fewer people, but I think it will change who we hire. I think we will likely need fewer tacticians and more strategists. I think that we are looking, there are tools that exist that help you understand which donor prospects to spend your time on. Now, I think that's a really, really great thing for universities that have strong databases. Ours is not. Historically, we don't have good information in it, so I'm not sure how much it would help right now. But I think I suggest everybody find peace with AI and learn as much as you can because it is coming. We are set for a profound transformation, not just in this field, but I think in a lot of other fields. And I'm really curious about it. And I think it would behoove us to be kind of on the cutting edge as best we can.
And add anything?
Yeah, what I would add to that, similar to Jake's sentiment, is AI. If it's not already in everything you're doing, it's going to be. And so I think it's a matter of time before we're all using it. For those who aren't already, and there's a lot of different flavors of AI, right? A lot of us are familiar with some of the tools related to writing and recommendations. And in FundMiner, we do have some AI applications built in, and we're also continuously developing new tools as well. And for us, AI helps with our implementation process. It helps with compliance monitoring and reviewing donor intent and the gift agreements and making sure that expenses are used correctly. We have benchmarking capabilities as well that we're working on, as well as recommendations and responding to questions. So I think we're going to start seeing it more and more and more. And I think that for us, specifically with FundMiner, we like to say that we're a operations platform with some AI tools rather than an AI platform. So we have AI supporting our software and supporting what we do, rather than it being a AI tool specifically. And so just small nuance there, but it's a powerful technology, and we're going to see more and more of it embedded in a lot of different ways.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in a little bit here too, because I mentioned that we partner with IBM and use their Watson AI technology. We have been, for a decade or more, doing some of what Jake referred to in terms of predictive modeling and building models that could help identify potential prospects for particular types of giving or particular types of initiatives. So BWF actually has a long history with it. And I'll give a couple plugs. Later this week in Orlando, I'm hosting a 3-hour AI Learning Lab as a part of the Association of Healthcare Philanthropies International Conference. And then next week in Chicago is the Association of Advancement Services Professional Summit, where I'm giving a short speech on AI, and I know there's quite a lot of other AI content out there. So from the predictive AI side of things that's been around for a while to the new generative AI technologies that are very readily available, it's definitely quite a bit of value there in a lot of different ways. All right, I'm going to try and jump through some more of these questions. It looks like, Kelsey, you answered one in the chat around whether the accounting and the scholarship teams also use the endowment and gift management system or FundMiner. And it looks like you said they did. Yes, that's correct. The other offices make use of the tools as well.
Yes, and actually getting that information in the hands of our scholarship office specifically was really helpful because their tool tracked its own balance. They were using Banner at the time, and so they saw their Banner balance, but they didn't really have, they needed to also see the university's accounting system balance as well, which was the true balance in the account, the cash balance that we had. So it really helped with them being able to see that. But additionally, they didn't have access to Razor's Edge, nor did they really want to be using Razor's Edge. And so with FundMiner, they then had access to all of the criteria and restrictions and gift agreements as well. So it was a great resource for the scholarship office to have access to all the information on their scholarships. And then the accounting team really liked it because particularly around budgeting, when they were getting budget requests, if they had faculty members who had funds they were overseeing with a bunch of unused money in them, and then they were going to the budget office to ask for money for that very same thing, the accounting team, liked having access to that information, so then they could allocate the resources more responsibly where they're really needed, and kindly suggest that they use the funds they already have access to. So
that's great. That's a great example of kind of an internal efficiency and an internal win. Can either of you highlight a specific instance where using the technology for the reporting and compliance led to additional fundraising or led to a forward-facing or fundraising win? Anything off the top of your heads?
So I can only answer anecdotally. I think if I took some time with it, I could probably look back to it. But I can say we had a flood of positive comments when we started actually spending the money that people gave us to spend, which was not happening. And I know that there are several people who have invested more since then. I can't think of a very specific, well, I'm not sure it'd even be appropriate to provide a specific example, but I can think of several off the top of my head where I know that people were kind of on the fence. They just wanted to know that their money was helping. We are working right now on it's going to be a seven-figure gift from somebody who's exactly in that space. For more than a decade, we weren't using their money. And now it's not just that she's made it clear. One of the other things that Chelsea built into the system was, and with collaboration with our provost's office, they have to have a spending plan, or a plan that says, look, we're not going to spend it this year because we're saving up for equipment, or we're saving up for a conference, or we're saving up for this or for that, whatever. And there's a level of accountability that really makes a difference, and it's just absolutely transformed. Just to give you an example, only about 73% of our endowments were quote unquote in compliance, meaning being spent or being spent correctly, which is stunning. Right now it's about 97%, and that transformation took place over 3 years. So just a profound transformation. It absolutely has had an impact. I'm not sure I wish that was something I had measured from the beginning. But yeah, it's had an impact for sure.
Great, thank you for that. I know you see the follow-up question around the culture and processes that you built, and what, if any, impact that has had on talent retention.
Yeah, I was actually just writing Aaron a response. We very, very carefully track all things related to turnover. But the thing that we actually focus time and energy on is what we call regrettable churn. And so who are those people who you would absolutely hire again? And what happened? And we have, I think it's 3, but it could be 4. Since I've been here just a little over 3 years, we have 3 people who fall in the category of regrettable churn. And all 3 of them absolutely needed to move to do that thing. The example I can point to is Chelsea. Chelsea left to start her own business. It would have been unfair, unwise, and not the right move to try to get her to stay. That would have been selfish for me. This was the right thing for her. We had a gentleman who was in our CFR office, and he moved with his fiance to LA, and that job wasn't set up to be remote at the time. And you know, he was really good and we miss him, and he got a job with USC, and you know, he and his fiance are happy. We had another who moved to be with a startup in Boston, and it was a really interesting job, and it would not have been the right move for us to try to retain that person.
Mhm.
We had one person recently, and I don't typically do reactive retention offers because we try very, very hard to do proactive retention strategies, like stay conversations and just tell people that there's a plan for them. But we just had a person who her former employer tried to steal her back, and we were able to have a conversation about what was next and provide her something really interesting. So we kept her. So as far as regrettable churn, we haven't had any in more than 3 years. And I think that's obviously I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
And I think one thing I would add to that is, and I can specifically talk about the operations team. I did a lot of work with them on aligning goals with institutional goals. Jake did some really great exercises with our advancement team on outlining our overarching advancement goals. And then I worked with my operations units on individual goals that rolled up to each of those. And we started having really intentional team building and culture building monthly meetings. And we saw a really big shift there. And so I don't like, our team started to perform better. And maybe some of the folks that we would, you know, in the beginning of the couple of years have thought might not be regrettable churn, you know, that transformed after that. And so I think Jake talked about this a lot, but as we transformed our culture across the organization, our people got better, and all of the processes involved, everything sort of started to get better.
And I'll say, I want to be clear, it's not perfect. We're trying every day. We're trying, you know, right now we're moving from the office I'm currently in to another one, and it's really hard. We're trying so hard to do right by our people, but uncertainty and change is hard. We've had a lot of reorgs, and we try to explain them the best we can. You know, we have reasons, we go through the reasons, we talk through them, but it's change. That's hard. You know, sometimes you got people who gossip. That's not super helpful. And those kinds of things. But we wake up every day working really, really, really hard to do right by the people who are here. And I feel good about it. I can sleep at night, you know, and while I think most days are good days, not all of them are, but we are sure trying.
Thank you for sharing that, Jake. So we are about to wrap it all up, but the last few questions. Chelsea, as you were going through some of the process changes, did you face any resistance? And if so, how did you overcome that?
Great question. I would say internally within the advancement office, any resistance was because of, I think, the extra work I was asking folks to do. They were fine doing the same old thing, and they're, you know, like, leave me alone. And so with those people, I found that what worked was kind of hand holding a little bit and sitting down with them and talking through the process and helping a little bit. And then they would kind of start to see it and see the change. And then they got excited and interested. So there were certainly some people that needed just a little bit more hand holding. I did have to have a sort of, you know, in the midst of tears, change is okay conversation with someone. So we did have one person completely break down. And she totally turned around and then was on board. And so again, with her, I kind of was like, hey, I'm going to be there with you through this. Let's do it together. And that turned out great. And then as far as outside of the advancement office, when it came to resistance to change, I just tried to always focus on what was in it for them and how this and going over the process would help them. And usually could kind of find an angle there.
Okay, great. We have 1 minute left, so I'm going to get to Holly's last question. When there are areas of the university or different areas of the university or organization that have different rules on measuring success or measure things differently, how do you manage that? Jake, ideas there, thoughts there?
Yeah, I would just say, you know, if you're raising more money, that's the most conspicuous indicator, as I've said before. And I think since that's a positive thing. But I actually think the real feeling goes in, we work so hard to be really great campus partners and develop those relationships such that if people have questions, they just call me, they text me, they ask me, or somebody on the team. So it's just, I mean, it's that interpersonal thing. I mean, I wrote to Holly, we actually don't have a foundation, and alumni engagement reports up to me. So we had good fortune. We're completely aligned there. And I know that's not always the case. Every situation is going to be different. And I think, the best that you can communicate and go over and above and being as good a partner as you possibly can be, that's going to help a whole heck of a lot.
Okay. Thank you both so very much for joining today. I really enjoyed this conversation. We, lots and lots we could continue talking about if we had more time, but thank you so much, and have a great rest of your week.
Thanks,
Thanks
Josh.
so much, Josh. This was wonderful. Thank you, everyone.